You're watching our tour of Switzerland, and we are now heading to the final city on the tour. We're going to Zurich, the economic capital of the country, not the political capital, that's Bern, but Zurich, what a spot. Zurich surprised us in a lot of ways with its old world charm. While most people know that Zurich is a modern banking center, you might be surprised to discover the charms of its extensive old town, which is probably the largest in Switzerland. Zurich has a high quality of life. In fact, it's been ranked as the world's best city in which to live by the Mercer Human Resource Foundation because of its superb cultural and economic and environmental conditions. Visitors can take pleasure in this wonderful lifestyle, enjoying friendly, efficient services while exploring its historic sites. And the first thing that we want to do after checking into the hotel is get out and take a walk on Niederdorfstrasse, the same street that our hotel is on. It's the heart of the old town. It's really a wonderful street. It goes for about 1 mile. It changes names a few times, and it has some lovely side streets that are also for the pedestrian. There's some excellent restaurants, there are modern shops, they sell clothing and antiques and furniture and souvenirs and books and everything that you'd need. And there's cafes, candy shops, coffee shops, food to go, elegant restaurants, and we're going to show it all to you as we thoroughly investigate Zurich. The old town extends across both sides of the river Limmat. We started out on what's called the right bank on the east side, and now we're on the left bank on the west side of town, which is a little bit more upscale. You've got some really high-end shops here. There's quite a few well-dressed bankers, and we'll be approaching the main street of the Bahnhofstrasse in just a moment. So this is where a lot of the high-end businesses are located. But both sides are very pleasant and very comfortable and filled with things to see. As we stroll along, continuing along on this first day's orientation walk, do some window shopping as we go. There'll be some free time later for all of our travelers who might want to come back and do some serious shopping on their own. But for now, we're sticking together and getting an overview. The Rennweg has always been one of the main streets of the city for hundreds of years, and it will lead you up to the Lindenhof, which is really where the city began. And it's really quite easy to find it. It's up on this small hill, and from the Lindenhof you have a fine view across the river to the main section of the old town and the tall spires of the Großmünster, Zurich's main church in the distance. There's linden trees growing in Lindenhof. It's just a park today, but in the past it was the site of some important Roman structures. There's a Roman tombstone, one of the only Roman artifacts that are still visible in Zurich. This town was really founded by the Romans, as were many of the towns throughout Europe 2,000 years ago. You exit Lindenhof down the south steps along Platzgasse, and that leads you back into this lovely shopping area of the old town. There's some little town squares and water fountains. Zurich boasts over 1,000 water fountains. They claim to have more water fountains than any other town in Switzerland. And you get into this maze of lanes that lead this way and that way. Well, don't worry about getting lost. It's small enough that you'll soon find yourself again. And in the midst of the alleys, you can't miss the towering St. Peter's Church. That steeple has Europe's largest clock, which is 28.5 feet across. And it's 500 years old and still keeps accurate time. The quiet square next to the church is one of the town's most charming spots. It's Zurich's oldest parish church. It was built in the 7th century originally, and that Romanesque tower was added in the 13th century. See, a lot of these buildings are from the Middle Ages and the 1500s, the 1600s, and yet their interiors are completely modern. They've been rebuilt, they've been renovated, and kept up to date. They've been used continuously over their hundreds of years of history, and that's always how something is properly maintained, is by being used. Augustiner-Gasse is one of the very beautiful streets of this old town. Notice its gentle curvature that leads you on. You wonder what's around the bend, and it's lined with these beautiful old facades. Lively spot with thriving shops and outdoor cafes, a lot of people out walking. So pleasant. And this is going to take us out of the old town, and now we're about to go around the bend onto Bahnhofstrasse, which is the great modern street in the heart of downtown Zurich. And here's where you've got the department stores, there's a lot of banks and corporate headquarters. There's a tram system in Zurich. They have quite a few different tram lines. These are quiet electric trams, no pollution and hardly any sound coming from them. It's a great system. No cars are allowed here on Bahnhofstrasse, just pedestrians and trams. So it makes a very efficient place to get around. We stopped into Hiltl Restaurant. It's a vegetarian restaurant that is the oldest vegetarian restaurant in Europe. It's been in the same location for over 100 years, and you can see why. It is really a popular and fantastic place. It's a self-service vegetarian buffet, all sorts of salads and cooked vegetables and deep fried items. They've got desserts and breads, and everything is delicious here. You pile as much as you want onto your plate, and then you just weigh it at the cashier. So it's very simple for self-service. It's not cheap. After all, we're in Switzerland, we're in Europe. To have a fine meal like this, it would cost you about $15 or maybe $20 if you really piled a lot onto that plate, as some of us did. It was so delicious that we came back for more the next day. Well, that's something about discovering an excellent restaurant in a city that you might not know very well. You're always tempted to go back to the same place and have another meal there. And there's pluses and minuses to that kind of strategy. You know, it's kind of a sure thing if you enjoyed it the first time, but it's always nice to explore and get some different atmosphere for your next meal. After all, we're just here in Zurich for a couple of days, and we want to see as much variety as possible, including taking a walk in the evening after a rain. Now, don't let the rain stop you when you're in one of these old towns, because as you can see, if it rains and then the rain stops, that's a magical moment, especially at twilight. You've got the cobblestones reflecting the glistening lighting. You've got the late twilight that's still lighting up the sky, and the sprinkles will come and go. You've got to pop your umbrella up and then you can put it away. And it's really an interesting time to be out. And then pick a nice restaurant for dinner and your evening's complete. Here we're at the Adler Restaurant. It's part of the Hotel Adler in the heart of the old town. Enjoying cheese fondue. That's certainly one of the most famous of all Swiss dishes, and it's really tasty and really quite simple. You have the melted cheese and bread, and you dip your bread in there, swirl it around, let it cool down a bit, and that's a nice appetizer, and then tuck into the main course. Swiss are great for all sorts of main dishes. Like any place, you'll get your fish and chickens and meats. In the morning, you might want to see where some of the food comes from. It's at this open market down on the shores of the lake, where the river Limmat hits the lake, right on the edge of downtown, and it's very popular. Several mornings a week, they're out here selling flowers and fresh vegetables and cheeses and meats. And this is a real local kind of place to hang out. You get to meet some locals, have some of this wonderful fresh bread. The Swiss bread is among the best anywhere, that rich dark bread, and of course they have a great variety of cheeses here. They don't call any of their cheese Swiss cheese, by the way. That's something that we've made up, the cheese with the holes in it. They have different names for all their different varieties. Pastas, salads, olives, you name it. This outdoor market has got all kinds of gourmet treats. And they open early, usually by 6:30 or 7 o'clock. These outdoor food markets are in full swing. So it really gives you something to do if you're an early bird. If you've gotten up and you want to take a little walk maybe before breakfast, there's hardly anything else happening in a town. The streets are empty and the shops are closed, and of course museums and attractions are all closed at that early hour. But if there's a food market, you can bet it's going to be going full tilt by 7 a.m. anyway. So it gives you something interesting to do, and then head back over to your hotel for breakfast, back to our Hotel Alexander. We just walk around. The town is small enough you don't have to take a bus to get anywhere. You can just go by foot. It just took about 15 minutes to walk from one end of town to the other, and then sit down, relax. We've worked up an appetite and have some of this tasty foods. It's a big buffet. Just help yourself, all you can eat at these breakfast buffets. Our hotel was right on the main pedestrian street in the heart of the old town. This was so convenient. The Hotel Alexander.
We are a 3-star hotel, little hotel in Zurich, and it's in the main part of Zurich, so you can go everywhere from here. It's near the main station and lake, and you can make some sightseeing. We are in the old town from Zurich. I would say in the old town Zurich lives, because all of the people come to the old town. A lot of restaurants are here, so all the people come to the old town to eat there. And it's also very nice because we have part of the old history here. It's from the Middle Age.
Many centuries.
Yeah.
Wow. 3 days in Zurich as a tourist. What would you do if you had 3 days?
Then would look around like on the Bahnhofstrasse. Most famous street in Switzerland, most expensive street,
Yeah.
good for shopping.
Right.
Then here around Old Town, walk around.
And then how about a little trip out of town, third day?
Out of town, then I would go to Lucerne maybe. Lucerne is very interesting. It's like the little town of Zurich. It's without stress. It's like a little sister to Zurich.
I see, yeah. Now, I read last month that Zurich was ranked as one of the best cities in the world to live in for people who live here. Have you heard that too?
I've heard that too, because I think we have not a lot of criminal things. You're very secure here, so you can go out in the night and you don't have to be worried about people. And the lifestyle is easy, and the economy is good. Yeah, people are nice.
Now, we're going to take another stroll along some of these narrow lanes in a slightly different part of town. We're along the river here, just beyond the great cathedral, beyond the Grossmünster, heading past these trams. Again, these trams are a great way to get around town. They're quiet, they're smooth ride, they're comfortable, and they're all over the place. We're heading into a section of town called Oberstdorfstrasse, and there's Kirchgasse, there's Münstergasse, all these different little side streets in this neighborhood. And again, it's for pedestrians only. There's no motor vehicles allowed in here. Maybe early in the morning there'll be some delivery vehicles and trucks that come in, but during the day they are all prohibited. So you have got a very comfortable environment. It's nice and quiet and peaceful. The shops have their goods spilling out onto the street. People can chat and look up these side alleys. Some of them have got some wild murals on them. There's very little graffiti in this town. They seem to keep a very clean city in Zurich. They really take care of this place. And there's art galleries, there's antique shops, and of course there's restaurants all over the place, modern furniture stores. And then we went into this wonderful chocolate shop. They have pastries and coffee and a little food service. Cafe Schober. There's a tea room here. You can sit down and have a light meal, and oh, an amazing decor. They've got all of these plants hanging from the ceiling. It's like you've walked inside some sort of a grotto. Everything growing out of the walls and out of the ceiling. It's a chain, and they're hoping to open a branch in Hawaii someday. Schwarzenbach is another one of the legendary stores of Zurich, right in the heart of town. They roast their own coffee. They have got a variety of foods that they prepare, especially the dried fruits and nuts. A couple of their main specialties. And they have a coffee shop. Next door is the Bodega Español. This is the Spanish bar. It's been here for a long time. Hangout for the artists. You find all kinds of curious shops on these little side streets as we make our way. We're on the right bank now, and we are near Niederdorfstrasse. And here the lane widens out, and it's called Stüsselhofstadt. Now, what makes these lanes so special? They're paved with cobblestones and lined with historic buildings, and they have little plazas with fountains in the middle. Here we are walking along Spiegelgasse. It's a place to linger and enjoy. Sometimes the streets widen and form little plazas or parks. They intersect with other lanes. Mostly they're just narrow lanes that are about 15 to 20 feet across. And they'll lead you to some surprises like this historic display. This is housed inside the city archives of Zurich at the Neumarkt. And it has a scale model of the old town of Zurich, showing its evolution from the Middle Ages up through the early Renaissance. It really gives you a bird's eye view of early life in Zurich. And then we continue wandering in this particular neighborhood. It's all around what's called the New Market, or the Neumarkt. And a little glimpse of some kindergartners here. A delightful mix of different ages of the infants and the moms and the teachers taking really careful care of them. It shows you that education is really valued in Switzerland. Teachers are very well paid and the education standards are very high. Turm is one of the very fine traditional restaurants of town on these side streets. Here's Obere Zaune. Walking along more of these narrow lanes, it's in the area still of the New Market. There's dozens of little lanes that branch off on different sides, bringing you further into this magic of the old town. And this neighborhood is just the right size. It's small enough so that you cannot get lost or exhausted, but it's large enough to keep you discovering new sights for a couple of days. And you can always sit down at a cafe and enjoy a meal. This is actually quite a nice restaurant here in Neumarkt. It's called Kantorei. And just up the road is the Rindermarkt. This junction with the Neumarkt is one of the town's most interesting intersections, and this neighborhood dates back to the year 1145. It still has some of the original buildings, especially the famous Turm, which is a 12th century Gothic tower you see back there. And then we take a stroll along Prediger Gasse, which is a very narrow pedestrian street. Of course, still there's no cars allowed here. The occasional motor scooter might come down, or a bicycle, or a baby buggy, but that's about it. And then there's the large Prediger Church in this neighborhood as well. We're near the plazas of Hirschenplatz and Stussy Hofstadt still. The Prediger Church has the tallest tower in town. It reaches 300 feet high, and the church dates back to the year 1230. Has a mix of Baroque decor along with the earlier Gothic. There's a nice plaza out in front of it. And then there's the Brunngasse that leads on to yet more of these narrow lanes connecting back towards the main artery of the old town, which is the Niederdorfstrasse. And then we approach the great cathedral of Zurich. It's called the Großmünster. And this is certainly the main historic site of the city. It's a huge Romanesque-style church that dates back to the year 1106. And this is where the Protestant Reformation began in Switzerland with the fiery sermons delivered by Reverend Zwingli. There's a statue of Charlemagne, the Holy Roman Emperor. And there's a beautiful cloister as part of the cathedral. Be sure to go next door and visit the cloister. It's not so obvious, but you just enter through the doorway. It's open all day long. It's a quiet area that would have been used for prayer and meditation and still is. The Großmünster is a very popular site. It's the symbol of Zurich with its two huge 15th century towers. And out front of the Großmünster, there's a staircase that'll lead you down to the river and you can cross on over. Those two towers are topped by 18th century domes. And if you're feeling particularly energetic, you could actually walk up the West Tower for a stunning view out across the city. Well, we've crossed the river now. Back over to the left bank. And passing some of these curious shops. This is a tea shop. It's almost like a tea museum. They've got Hawaii tea even. One of their many varieties of blends that they create specially in this tea shop. You can buy teapots or tea caddies, all kinds of accessories to go with your fresh leaf tea. The Schipfer section of town along the river has some cantilevered walkways out over the water and a couple of bridges and arcaded passages right along the water's edge. This is some of the oldest part of Zurich, and it's really another great little spot to be walking through. We're going to show you some more nice little neighborhoods here. There's the old Rathaus, the old city hall of town. Quite a few very elegant buildings. We're in the Frau Münster section of the city now. Frau Münsterstrasse. There's Borsenstrasse, as in the old stock exchange. Some of these buildings have got an Italian Renaissance style about them. You see with this arcaded loggia. There's art galleries, and there's some very important historic sites here. The Stadthaus looks like it's Gothic. It looks very ancient, but it's actually neo-Gothic. It was built back in the late 19th century in the Gothic style. Kind of a reconstruction of an earlier structure that looked just like it. And right next door is the Frau Münster Church. This is a very old Gothic church that dates back to the year 1280. Has a striking pattern of pointed Gothic arches. But the main attraction inside the church is something that's quite modern. It's stained glass windows by Marc Chagall. He did these when he was in his 80s.
Primarily a painter.
So these stained glass windows date from the late 20th century. There's a huge train station in Zurich, the main Bahnhof. It's like a city in itself. There's a shopping mall downstairs, there's restaurants, there's cafes, there's places to buy clothing, and especially they've got trains, of course, and we are here because we're catching a train. We're leaving town.